Hello React Native developers, welcome to Can It Be Done in React Native. In this episode, we are looking at what is arguably the most important primitive to give this feeling of delightfulness to the users of your app. Guys, I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. In this week's episode, we are looking at the snapshot shared transitions. So here I have a list of stories. I can tap on one, drag the story around, and as I move the story, the scale is a bit different, and I can snap back here or into position. And I am pretty excited about this video because shared transitions can really dramatically improve the level of delightfulness of your apps. And they are now really a commodity in React Native. They are extremely easy to do. And they used to not be possible to do at all in React Native, at least not in a performant manner. So I'm really happy that now we have a great primitive we can play with, and that really makes your app look and feel incredible. And this primitive is the shared element library from Ruches. And there are two libraries, the library that deals with the main functionality of building a shared transition. And then on top of that, we have the React Navigation shared element library, which builds on top of it, and that does all the boilerplate that needs to be done if you want to integrate shared transition with React Navigation. And this library in version 3.0 works with React Navigation v5, and it just does a lot of boilerplate you would have to do if you were to use the raw library directly. I've played with the raw library directly, and I can tell you that if you want to do the integration yourself with your navigation, it's a lot of work. So this is just great that this has been done for us via the React Navigation shared element library. So again, incredible community work. Without these community libraries and the support also of Expo and other players in the community, we wouldn't have, so I'm thinking about SVG, Reanimated, we wouldn't have these essential primitives that allow React Native app to look and feel incredible. And so quickly, the way shared element transitions work in React Native. So we have here two screens. So the screen with the list of stories and the screen with the story open. And by defining the shared elements and which IDs, so here there is an ID linked to this story. So the library knows from which element to which element transition. And when we go back as well, so what the library does is that on press, it will overlay this view. So it's going to calculate the size of the shared element and also its visual, overlay it on top of the view, transition to the end view. So this is done while it's overlaid on top of the screen. And then below the new view is going to appear. The overlay here is going to disappear. And so for the user, it's going to look like magic. The shared transition is going to look perfect. So if we go back to the phone here, so this is how we're going to implement the shared transition to go from the thumbnail to the full story. And then we're going to add a pan gesture handler so that when we move the story around, we translate the story. We also change its scale. And then when we release the gesture, we're going to calculate the snap point to know if we go back to the original position or we go back to the full screen view like this. But what do you guys think? Can it be done in React Native? Let's have a look. Guys, before we get started, one thing, if you're interested to learn the fundamentals of gestures and animations in React Native, I hope that you will check out my online course at startreactnative.dev. My goal with this course is to provide you with all the tools and knowledge necessary in order to build incredible user experiences that will run at 60 FPS, even on low-end devices. Reanimated 2 is now in release candidate, so get ready. I have already quite some lessons for Reanimated 2. I'm in the process of updating the course to a full version. So if you're interested to learn the fundamentals, I hope that you will check it out at startreactnative.dev. We are into VSCode now, and I have a boilerplate project which you can download from the video description in case you want to code along with this example. I have a stack navigator with two screens, the snapshot screen, which is this list view that you see here, and the story screen, which is the screen that opens when I click on one item from the list. And we're going to do this in two steps. First, we're going to set up the shared transition to go from one image of the list to the full view and back. And the second step, we're going to set up the gestures and animations to work like on the snapshot app. And to set up the shared transition, step one, we're going to, instead of using a stack navigator, we're going to use a shared element stack navigator. We're going to, in each of our screens, tell shared element navigation to where are our shared elements and which IDs they have. And finally, in story, we need to tell, so when we go back from stories, we need to tell to which element we need to do the shared transition to, because in snapshot, all these elements in the list view can potentially be shared elements. So when we go back, we need to tell him to which story we're coming back from. So let's start with creating the stack navigator, and I think that would be create shared element stack navigator from React navigation shared element. So this is good. And we can, the order of in which we're going to do this doesn't matter. So here in story, what we want to do is to specify when we go back to which elements in the list we need to build the shared transition. So we can use a prop here called shared elements. We get, I think, the root as parameter, the router, and we can simply return an array with the ID of the story. So we know where we come back to. So I think that would be root.param.story.id. So if we go in the snapshot component, it's a list in the scroll view. We have stories thumbnail. And when we press on one story here, so to know which story we display, we pass story as parameter of the navigation. And so here we can tell him to which story we need to go back to. Now we need to specify to the library which elements are the shared transitions. So in the list view, each thumbnail is a shared element. So we can do here shared element. And ID is the ID of the story. So story.id. So this is in the list view. And then in the screen where we have a single story, so in the story screen, we can, I guess, set it up here. Shared element, ID is story.id. And I think because this is wrapped into a view, we're going to need to also propagate the flex. So let's have a look and let me here disable the gesture of the navigator. So that didn't work. Let me reload. So here we do, and we cannot exit because I just disabled the gesture. That actually looks good. Let me do it one more time. Okay, maybe I should enable the gesture for now. That looks good. So we do have some opacity, but we can fix this. We do have the shared transition. Now let's do the gesture and animation. So this is the story component. So we're going to wrap it with a gesture handler. A pan gesture handler. And single child of a pan gesture handler needs to be an animated view. So I'm going to transform this into an animated view. And we need to create our gesture handler. So on gesture event. And to create our gesture handler using reanimated view, we're going to use animated gesture handler. And so let me import it. Let me import it here. Let me import animated. So let me create two animation values, translate X, translate Y, because we're going to be able to move the card around. So I'm going to create translate X is used shared value and translate Y, which is also a use shared value. And just to test, we can do on active, get the translation X, translation Y value. Oh, we add it here in the completion. And we can do translate X.value equals translation X and translate Y.value equals translation Y. And we can create a style that is using these values just to see if it works. So we can create style, use animated style. And I can return transform, translate X.value, translate Y.value. And let's pass the style. We can add the flex here, flex 1. So I can pass style here directly. Up. So now I can move it around. That's nice. Of course, if I stop, nothing happens. So let's deal with the gesture when we release. So on end. And I'm gonna need the velocity X, velocity Y to do the spring. So we need to check if when we release the gesture, there are two positions possible. Either we spring the image back to full screen, or either we go back and we let the shared transition deal with doing the transition from the current state of the screen to the previous screen. So to detect if we go back or not, we calculate the snap point. If we're snapping to the top of the screen, we just spring to translate X and translate Y to be 0. If not, we just do navigation.go back. So let's create go back. And to know if we go back, we calculate the snap point where we're snapping. Redash is providing us a utility function to let us know where the value is going. So it's called snap point. We pass the value. Here it's going to be translation Y. We are looking vertically. We pass the velocity, velocity Y. And the snap points are either 0, top of the screen, or bottom, height. And we go back if the snap point is height. So let me import snap point. If we go back, we just do navigation go back and we let the shared element library take care of everything else. If not, we Spring. So translate x.value equals with Spring to 0. And we pass the velocity as parameter to configure the Spring. So that would be velocity equals velocity x. And we do the same for y. Okay. Should I? So you see here it springs nicely back to the top. And if I close, yeah, pretty cool, right? So we have a strange opacity transition when we start, but we can go back nicely. Something is off with the shared transition. I'm wondering. I know what is wrong. I think this is the issue because here the library does a special processing if it's an image, and here I think it doesn't detect that the shared element is an image because there are childs in between. And I am tempted to put it here in order to improve the way the transition works. However, so does it mean container? Probably I should add a style flex one here so that the image displays properly. So already much better. Yes. Perfect. But as you can tell, there's some things we need to improve. First, you see here, this shouldn't appear when I'm moving this card around. This should have some border radius. And on the snapshot app, the more you go down, the more the story gets smaller. I guess to indicate intuitively that, when snapping to the bottom position, it will go back here. So let's massage the octopus. Let's do these things. So we go back in story. Let's do the border radius. So we want some border radius when the position is active. So is gesture active? Boolean value default false. On start, we set it to true. On end, we set it to false. And we can create a style. So let's call it border style, which is a use animated style. Sorry. Border radius. We can do like a transition to it. And we go, so if the gesture is active, we go to 24, if not 0. I think should be good. And we can pass it to the image. So this becomes an animated.image. If it's a video, we can pass it here also, and this becomes an animated video. Let me create animated video. So animated video equals animated, create animated component video. Okay. Pretty cool. Now works as well with the video. Now let's hide the image here in the background. So if we go here, so the thumbnail, oops, sorry about that. we're gonna add a state for the opacity. So opacity, set opacity. When we click, we're gonna set it to 0. Default value is 1, of course, it's visible. And then when the focus is found again, we reset it to 1. So use state 0, no 1. Let me just fix here the import. So default value is 1. When we press here, we set it to 0. Maybe I should put it here after. Opacity, we pass. I'm wondering where should I apply the style here. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter to which element. And when the focus is found again, I think we have use focus effect. Yes, is what we want. And do we get? We don't know if it's focused or not. Can we do navigation is focused? If navigation is focused, is it a method or a function? It's a function. Then we can set opacity back to 1. So let's have a look. Let me reload here. Oops. Did I? No, okay, it's working. So I press, and you see in the background, you don't see the image. We have nice border radius, and I can snap back to the top. And here it snaps nicely into position. Isn't that cool? So we just forgot a small thing here, is that when we move the image around, we need to scale down the image. And so here we can interpolate a scale value. So we can interpolate based on the translate Y. And so we go from 0 to height. And at 0, the scale is 1. At height, the scale is, let's say, 0.5. This we can configure. And we want to clamp, meaning we don't want to go above and below 1 and 0.5. And so we can apply the scale here in the transform. Let me import extrapolate. So I'm going to apply the scale here. Let's have a look. So you see now it scales down nicely, but what you cannot see, because you cannot see my finger, but obviously because of the scale, my finger, this is where my finger is right now. So it doesn't follow the card anymore. So we can just, because here the translation is based on a scale of 1, right? So we can just multiply by scale. So to keep the finger, so if it's 0.5, we translate only by half. So that will keep the finger on the view. Yes, perfect. So now my finger is following the view. And so let me just reload again, because I saw the background was visible. So I tap, yeah, it works nicely. The card follows the position of my finger and I release. So just a small edit. I forgot to add the scale transformation. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this example. As you've seen, these shared element transitions are quite easy now to implement in React Native. And just to think that a while back, these were almost impossible to do in React Native, or not possible to do in a performant manner. And they can really dramatically improve the level of delightfulness in your apps. And I am so glad that now these are a commodity in React Native. This is the last video that we are recording into this room. I am moving out next week. Hopefully I will find a nice new setup and the schedule of videos won't be too disrupted. So I am looking forward to talk to you soon, and until next time, happy hacking.